That sounded more like a medium round of applause to me than a big round of applause. I feel like y'all can do a little better than that. Come on. Come on. And now my panelists have abandoned me, even though they were supposed to walk out on stage with me, but these are the perils of live entertainment right now, is what we're having right here. So with me today, as soon as they walk out onto the stage, which should be shortly, is Emily Heyward, who is the co-founder of Red Antler, Philip Krim, who is the co-founder of Casper, and last but certainly not least, Tina Sharkey, who is the co-founder of Brandless. We are going to have an amazing conversation today about what makes a good brand. The title is The Perils and Promise, or Promise and Perils of Branding. But with these companies and the success that they've had, I see very little peril and pretty much only promise. Which is a great thing to be in a room with so many illustrious and esteemed entrepreneurs and brand marketers and creators. I want to start out with one bit of housekeeping notes, which is actually for y'all. If y'all want to tweet some questions at me, you can. My Twitter handle is @JShieber, and that's JSHIEBER. This is really just to pad my follower count. But beyond that, I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. To start that off, show of hands, how many of y'all are actually like founders of retail companies, e-commerce companies that are doing branding things? Well, that's a fair bit, so hopefully y'all will find this a little interesting, knock on wood. Emily, I wanted to start with you, if I may, and I heard an interview that you did with Jonathan Fields where you were talking about sort of your background, and you mentioned that you studied postmodernism at Harvard?
Yes.
Okay, so how does postmodernism play at all into the work that you're doing now? Is it because everything is a fiction and everyone creates their own reality?
No, I would not say that. I think that it was more about breaking down consumer culture and what makes us do what we do, and not taking for granted the behaviors that we all take part in every day, but instead really taking the time to figure out, what's actually motivating people and what forces are at play in something as simple as walking into a store and, grabbing a bottle of detergent.
And you were in advertising before,
I was.
Right? So, and then you started Red Antler, which we'll get into in a second. I love origin stories, but we'll leave it right there for right now. And Philip, move on to you. So you were you founded the Merit Group, which was doing a bunch of like e-commerce websites for all sorts of companies. How did that inform the decision to take it to the mattresses and start a mattress brand?
Yeah, I've spent my entire career, really since I was a sophomore at the University of Texas, in Hook'em Horns, in digital advertising, e-commerce, digital marketing. And so started in this space in kind of the early 2000s, started that company in 2002, and really saw the evolution of online advertising, saw the evolution of e-commerce. One of the categories we sold with that company were mattresses. So I saw the consolidation happening over the last 15 years, saw how the retail landscape really didn't change from a consumer standpoint, and ultimately informed a lot of our key understandings about what we wanted to do with Casper.
And Tina, your career, we could talk for 25 minutes about all the things that you've done. You were at iVillage, you worked with Michelle Phan at Ipsy when you were at Sherpa Foundry, you were at Sesame Workshop. How did that trajectory inform your thinking as you thought about creating Brandless?
I would say that everything that I've ever done has always been about community. And how do you connect people to their passions? How do you connect people to their affinities? And how do you think about sort of both companies, but more importantly, people and movements? And so Brandless was formed with the very specific intention in building a community of people that had a shared belief that everyone deserved better, and better didn't need to cost more. And so I would say that all of those experiences, whether it was iVillage or AOL or any of those, were all about how do you connect people to actually unlock their own power. And so that was really at the essence of what Brandless stands for.
Well, I mean, that's the essence of what the internet stands for, ostensibly, in some ways, right? And you can apply this notion to any number of the sort of endeavors that people are engaged in online. But I wanted to I know that y'all had a few slides that you wanted to show of some of the products to talk about what you're doing, and unfortunately I forgot to grab the clicker, so this is going to be interactive among the panel. Tina, if you wouldn't mind, I think that there is a clicker up there. Oh, I'm gonna grab it. Or you got it. Yeah, there we go. And so now we're going to take a look at some of the products that are on offer. Tina, can you tell me what we're looking at right now?
That is Brandless. And we're not about our products, although our products are awesome, but this panel is really about sort of what is the underlying architecture of building a brand. And so at Brandless, we trademarked the white space as a metaphor for it's really about your voice, and we want you to put your voice in the center of this. It's not about what we say about ourselves, it's what a friend tells a friend. And so by creating that very intentional white space, it lets people tell their own stories and products tell their own stories. And so in partnership with Red Antler, it was like Zen in the art of the unbrand, in that we were trying to imagine what it felt like to build a brand in the hopes that people would start to populate that narrative. So the first things that got populated in that narrative is things are what they are. Tomato basil pasta sauce, it's organic, it's gluten-free, it's vegan, and it's brandless. And we turn brandless into an attribute. That everything that you see here really tells its own story. Mott's and Del Monte don't own applesauce. Applesauce owns applesauce. That's its own narrative, as is every product has its own story to tell, and people have their own stories to fill in.
Well, applesauce doesn't own applesauce, right? I mean, there are manufacturers that are behind applesauce that make that product, right?
You could argue that fact. I
mean, can you argue that fact? There are manufacturers that make applesauce.
There are not. You
Applesauce
can't argue
doesn't
that
come.
fact, but you could argue the idea that applesauce in its purest sense, or facial cleanser or anything like that, it just is that, and that everything else around it is a narrative. And so if you just strip things down to what their most basic things are, that products can tell their own stories based on their attributes and what they stand for, and people shouldn't have to search and hunt for those things.
Emily, let's talk about that, about crafting that narrative, because that's what Red Antler does, right? I mean, y'all have worked with pretty much every one of, or most of the most successful brands that have launched recently as sort of e-commerce, direct-to-consumer stuff. We're talking about Allbirds and Casper and Brandless and so on and so on and so on. When you interact with a company, at what point in the process are you coming in, and how integrated are you with this notion of brand creation?
So our clients are really split among two different phases. One is pre-launch. So Tina, Philip, we met these teams before they had even launched, in the case of Casper, before they even had a name. And we're getting involved from the very start to help not create the vision, because obviously we're working with founders who have extremely strong visions, but really distill it into its core essence and then figure out how that translates throughout the whole experience. And then we also work with some companies who have already launched, but maybe did it a little bit scrappier to begin with, and recognize, after they raise another round or as competition gets more hairy, that it's time to take another look at brand.
Well, and that's interesting. So I read an article, Tina, when you were just getting started with Brandless, that you had a placeholder name for the company, which was Dosi, right? DHOSI. So how did you move the company, and how did those conversations go, where you started thinking about shaping the brand from Dosi to Brandless, or was that always in the
Dosi
cards?
was always a fake name. It was a code. We were in stealth mode, and so the name was always Brandless. Well, Dosi was actually it was a town in India where the mud from that hill was meant to have Ayurvedic properties. So in some cases, it was the site of a first brand. So it was just our stealth name. We never branded Dosi as our thing.
How much of this process of creating a digital brand how much of the playbook was written by Warby Parker when they started out, and then moving on? Y'all used to call yourselves the Warby Parker of mattress companies, right? At one point?
I don't think that's a name we use internally. I would say...
Lazy journalists used it.
I think every company kind of learns from predecessors, and Warby Parker's been doing kind of this playbook and model for 8 years now. Folks like Dollar Shave Club, Harry's came before Casper. We learned a lot from them. We continue to look at the landscape, and so I think there is no single playbook, or else every company would be executing in the same way. But instead, there's a collective that you can learn from different companies and what looked like it could be working well for them, but do it your own way and do it. We always try to think, what's the Casper way to come into physical retail or do things online, et cetera.
Now, for the young entrepreneurs or any aged entrepreneurs that are out there, trying to think about how to start a new brand online, there's literally so little friction to starting your own company. What advice would you give them as they sort of foreground brand in the strategy? What's the most important thing for them to think about as they think about crafting their brands? I hope that question was good, y'all. See how y'all like it.
I think that it's really important from day one to understand what you stand for beyond what you're selling. So what's the emotional promise of what you're offering beyond just this is a really comfortable mattress or this is, an amazing set of products that are affordable. Because that's also going to enable you to scale. I think if you root your brand too much in a functional benefit, you're going to find yourself stuck a few years down the road when you're looking to expand your offering and your entire brand is about this one product versus about ultimately what you can, become and what consumers can become by being a part of your world.
I would add to that, it's also that branding is not an exercise where you look at a bunch of things on the shelf and say, that one is the one I want to go with and pick it. Working with Red Antler like we did, it's a partnership to really go through and understand what's important to the founders. What do you want to stand for as a company? What do you want to stand for on the product side of things? And it's an evolution of getting that stuff out, formalizing it. And with Casper, we had never gone through that process before. And so we were very lucky to be able to rely on Emily and JB and the team at Red Antler about helping us understand and crystallizing some of those points. And so the brand that ends up coming out of that is really a long, arduous process that you have to spend a lot of time in because it should be a reflection of the founders and what's important to the company and the mission and vision there.
Now, y'all are all New York-based companies, right? Like everyone...
Not Brandless.
No, we're in San Francisco and Minneapolis.
Oh, well, there we go. I apologize. For some reason, I thought you were New York-based. It's because you're cool. It's because you're so cool.
Thank you. Well, I'm from New York, so...
Well, there you go.
There you go.
But there was a recent sort of tweet storm that an investor did about LA as sort of the next big hub for branded commerce and e-commerce, leveraging all of the influencers per capita that exist there. And God bless, I know it. I live there now. It's pretty terrible. The city's awesome, but the number of self-absorbed selfie takers is amazing. When you think about leveraging community or leveraging a follower, what role will influencers play in the development of new consumer brands? You worked with Michelle at Ipsy.
Yeah, I would say that influencers, in our particular case, play a huge role, but often in the micro sense. So the first community that we met, literally, we launched on July 11th last year, and I think on July 12th, the vegans of LA found us on Facebook, and they just started sharing it with all their friends. And so we actually did our first pop-up in LA in May in West Hollywood, and the first community that we invited in to bring in all their friends were the vegans of LA because they were the first community we met. And so whether it's the gluten-free community, the vegan community, or the people who are reimagining the brands that they use or environmentally friendly things or design things like those micro niches where they have really strong relationships, they're sharing recipes, they're sharing ideas, they're sharing hacks, those we find are the ones that really come and stay in our community because they're co-creating the content with us. They're co-creating a lot of the product because they're asking for things. So we're accelerating things because we want to meet their needs. And that's a huge part of what we do is just thinking about who can we serve and then how can we bring them into the conversation.
And how has that worked out at Casper? Are you leveraging influencers when you think about building the brand?
We've definitely had a lot of celebrities, athletes, influencers that have talked about the brand, talked about the company since the very beginning, and it's been awesome. It's something where we don't actively go out and pay these folks. They just are natural fans of the products that we sell, and they've been very vocal about it. So we've been very lucky. We've had some celebrity investors that are also very vocal about it. And we think it's a great way to just build brand awareness. And so I think you have to build brand awareness in a multifaceted approach. And I think that can be a great component for businesses that want to leverage visibility through that channel.
Now, Emily, you were talking about the sort of having a unique and sort of honest voice to really craft a brand and think about how you're going to build your company. But one of the things that's had the greatest impact on the retail and e-commerce space recently has been the advent of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and sort of the ways in which people are parsing consumer spend and consumer demand. How are those technologies, which one could argue are incredibly impersonal, impact the ways in which people think about starting a company? Because one of again, going back to this tweet storm, the idea was that you have an influencer, that influencer can find out whatever it is that people are looking for or buying online, smack their own name on something, and then start pitching it and build a platform that way for growth.
Yeah, I think it remains to be proven how much of that can be automatic. I think that, you can obviously use data and machine learning to deeper understand behaviors, but I don't think that then means that you can spin it back and have a formula that's gonna, absolutely predict and be able to influence people's next behavior. I think a lot of what we see succeed is originality and surprise and not just relying on what's been done before.
Well, and I mean, Brandless is writing a number of consumer trends, right? So you're looking at gluten-free, you're looking at organic products, you're looking at toxin-free products. You've got a whole range of supplies for the home, for health and wellness, for beauty, all of these things. But was that you sort of tapping into the zeitgeist, or was that you saying, okay, look, there's these things that are happening. We know that we can sell these products and we can do it in a way that's sort of mass affluently approachable or something?
I think if you go back to the idea that we were starting a movement, we were building a community that was based on the idea that everyone deserves better and better doesn't need to cost more. We then started with the things people reach for every day. And we said, wait a second, why is it that organics and all of these other pieces, why Casper is a cousin or Warby Parker is a cousin or Allbirds, is they're direct to consumers. And so if we can go direct to consumer, how can we open up the available access to better things at fair prices, starting with the things people reach for every day? And so access to organics, access to gluten-free, access to vegan, access to FSA certified, tree-free products. $3 was not the starting point for that. And we wanted to democratize access to that. And so that's why we started with all of those things, because we wanted people to not have to choose between what they wanted and what they can afford. But we also knew that not everybody has $3. And so if we really wanted to democratize access to that, we wanted to say, how do we support those people too? And that's why every time you check out, we partner with Feeding America, because hunger, 42 million people go hungry in this country every day. And at the very essence of Brandless is to live more and brand less. And so if you want people to live more, how do you scale kindness as the emotional benefit of the brand?
Isn't Feeding America also sort of about the optimization of supply chain? I mean, it's basically taking unused products from grocery stores and giving them to food banks, which is great. But that in itself is not like buying a meal for someone. It's sort of taking things that were going to get thrown out and then.
They're a nonprofit who has scaled a system to be able to. They're the largest hunger relief organization, right. And so we're not an NGO. We're not in a 501c3.
Right.
But we don't believe that profit and purpose need to live separately. They can live together in a company. And so we identified them as, to your point, as the most scaled people trying to go after the hunger crisis. It's actually Hunger Action Month this month. And so we've got to figure out how more people in this country don't go hungry every day.
It's an amazingly profound point. I want to get back into sort of the branding aspects of this and what's important for not only what's important for society, but what may be relevant to these entrepreneurs. And one thing that we've talked about, or that's been written about a lot, is the tension between having a direct-to-consumer brand online and then opening retail facilities, physical retail presences. And I know, Philip, that y'all opened one earlier this year in New York. How's that going for you? What are sales like there versus online? How are you managing that relationship?
Yeah, we think offline or physical retail is a great extension for direct-to-consumer brands and businesses. And if you think about it, it is a direct one-to-one in-person conversation with customers. And retail's been doing phenomenally well for us. We have 20 stores in market today. We announced we're going to go to 200 stores over the next 3 years. Wow. The stores are performing really well. And from a customer experience standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for our category. Our category are selling highly considered products because they make such a big difference to people's lives and they're a large purchase.
Right.
And so oftentimes people want to talk to someone. They want to understand what the products are. They want to touch and feel the product, understand why we design it the way we do, why we've invested so much in R&D, what that means for our products, how does that differentiate it. And so retail's done phenomenally well for us and we're really excited to scale it.
Is that something that y'all are thinking about at Brandless as well?
100%. We're going to be in New York the last 2 weeks in October, and with a pop-up. And really, for there, it's about taste and trial.
Right.
It's about community gatherings. It's about sharing stories, and it's about having people sort of decide and engage to. Whilst it's not a considered purchase as much like a mattress or a life stage, it's an everyday one. But if you're going to switch to an organic olive oil, or you're going to switch to an organic ketchup, or try incredible new snacks, you want to have that sensory experience. Right. And online can only go so far. Plus, it allows us to meet up with our community that supports us virtually. It's great to be able to meet them in real life.
Yeah. So you mentioned another interesting point, which is about the tension between products that are sort of consumable goods, sort of commodity goods that people buy every day, and something big like a mattress. Emily, when you talk to different companies that are operating at such different scales, how do you advise them to think about things like ad spend, when they should be, whether their ad should be focused on branding per se, or whether it should be focused on sort of getting the product into the hands of consumers?
I mean, that's a tension that every startup deals with, is sort of how much do you focus on brand building versus, end of the funnel conversion. And I think it's always a balance, but ideally you're not thinking about those two things in opposition, and you really see every moment that you're interacting with your consumers as a chance to build the brand and build affinity. And I think something I know Casper has done so well is really see a lot of their advertising as a gift to their customers, and finding ways to entertain people, even when you're trying to ultimately motivate them to click buy.
Right. Well, you have a magazine, right? Isn't there a sleep magazine?
We do. It's called Woolly. You could buy it on our website, and it has a bunch of content around sleep. It's not traditional content. It's something that was designed to be left on your nightstand. You could read as you're falling asleep, and we think content's been a great way for us to build the relationship with our customers beyond just the initial purchase. Woolly.
I mean, we only have a few minutes left, and I'd really like to get to this, because there is an elephant in the room whenever you talk about e-commerce or retail, and that's Amazon, Target, Walmart, or several elephants, a herd of elephants, let's say. When you think about how young startups can compete with these, because obviously, Target offers simply organic products that are organic and available to consumers. Everyone is offering. You've got so many competitors that have come out of the woolwork right now to like bite the Casper model that it's kind of comical. But what is the brand really the only competitive advantage that companies have when they look at how they approach Walmart or approach Amazon?
I think it's brand, and brand defined in a larger sense, which includes experience. And I think what Amazon certainly doesn't offer, and Walmart to a certain extent as well, is a chance to really discover, to go deeper, to have a story told to you, to really immerse yourself in a world. I think Amazon's amazing when you know exactly what you want and you need it to arrive within minutes. But I think if you're really trying to develop a deeper relationship and ultimately motivate people to try something new, it's actually very hard to do that on Amazon.
And have y'all found that you've been able to compete effectively against these guys with the notion of the brandless brand?
Yeah, I mean, Brandless is a brand. It's not brandless. But I think that Philip makes a great point about content and back to community, which is that if you're in direct dialogue and you're co-creating along with the people that you serve, or you're educating them, or you're sharing stories, that the brand becomes a narrative that's bigger than any individual product. And ultimately, the product itself becomes a souvenir of that movement. And I think we saw that with Nike yesterday, and their fall campaign with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, that is like movement and then specificity, and storytelling and standing for something. And I don't think that a brand can be put in a box in the way that it might have been done, many, many years ago. It's not about the logo. It's about the narrative and about the platform and about the story and about the voice. It can't be centrifuged to say, well, if it's this or it's that. It's actually the architecture of all of it.
Someone who is much smarter than me about branding, who is a fellow that I talk to occasionally about this stuff, because he's smarter than me about branding, said something that I thought was really interesting. I wonder how it resonates with you. Luxury isn't about price anymore. It's about perception and aesthetic. Does that seem accurate? And if so, how does that relate to the ways in which y'all approach your customers and the way you approach your clients?
Yeah, I think that's true to the extent that people aren't just looking to spend, triple the price to have like a logo on their handbag, right? They're caring more about the origin story. They're caring more about knowing that they're contributing to something better, a better way of making things, and more time spent, more quality. So I think that the days of just sort of lazy status are definitely becoming less and less relevant.
And with that, I'm afraid we are just about out of time. It's been really a pleasure to talk to all of y'all. I really appreciate the time very much. I hope y'all learned something. I certainly did. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Y'all have a wonderful rest of the day.